it's a two-step process. First, you have to say go live, and then it waits a while for you to be ready to publish. And then it does this cycle between these. Go.
Okay. Lord, make our conversation tonight fruitful with your grace so that it has meaning both for us and for anyone who sees it. Go stronger in faith and closer to you through Christ our Lord.
Amen. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Well, Father Tony, I was getting ready for this talk today, and this is called Quarantine Corner.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of humorous notes that came up in something I was reading today. We almost haven't had a chance to have a live conversation with anyone for the last 6 weeks. I feel very blessed to be here to be able to see you in person. But for those of you who haven't seen anyone in person, here's a little humor. You need a little starter to get your conversation going because you haven't seen each other for 6 weeks. So it's so nice to see a human mouth. What other human mouths have you seen today? How about this? Have you been outside recently? Were there trees? Did they rustle in the breeze? And then this one's my favorite when you're doing video conferencing. I love your shirt. What else are you wearing? PJs. Yeah.
Oh gosh, I saw something fascinating today. 2 blind people out for a walk together. Both with a stick, both with masks on. I imagine if you're blind, you have to because you don't know if you'll come across someone or not.
Or how close you are.
Yeah. But just walking confidently with their sticks, arm in arm.
That's beautiful.
It was. It really was.
Well, and today is the day for it. Just glorious day.
Is today Earth Day or yesterday?
Today is. Yeah.
Earth Day. I remember the first one. I was in high school.
That's 1970, I think it was.
Yeah. And my best friend, brother Johnny, was a senior at Bishop Amata. Larry tells me they drive up and no Johnny. And where's Johnny? He was riding his bike today to school. He's a senior. He said, I know, but it's Earth Day. What's Earth Day? I didn't know what it was. After that, I knew.
That might have been the first secular feast day. As I think about another every day of the calendar, but that's the first one I really recall. Well, we were talking last night about sin, and we were just about ready to transition to this other discussion about the sins that you as priests encounter most often in the confessional in your experience.
It's fun to talk about things in the abstract. When we talk to people, they're very concrete.
Absolutely.
They don't want theory and they don't want abstraction. They want to know, is this a sin? And why is this right? Why is this wrong? And so forth. And one of the big ones that we hear all the time is living together. Oh, that's wrong. I would venture to say the majority of engaged couples that I see now have been living together.
70% who get married in the church are living together.
And God bless them for coming to church to get married.
Half will not. Half will not get married in the church. The good ones who do, 70%.
And
that means 15% are not having relations, are trying to be chaste when they get married.
Before marriage,
15%. When you put those two together.
Well,
although I did, it's been a while, but I read, and you probably know it now, read the statistic, and I don't remember it exactly, but the number one factor in couples breaking up without getting married is living together first.
3 times more likely.
3 times more likely.
But it's fascinating. Why? Have any of you read the book Unprotected by Miriam Grossman?
No.
It was originally Unprotected by Anonymous MD. She's a psychiatrist at UCLA.
I read about that.
It is fascinating. I went to a talk she gave at the National Book Club or National in DC, and she gave a lecture there, and she talked about just how, especially in campus clinics where there's all these psychologists, that they've ignored all of the studies on oxytocin, and that when you have this oxytocin, because you have sex with each other, there's this bond that takes place. And you begin to think, I can't live without this person. This person is the most important thing in my life. But it totally obfuscates reality. It's the fake out drug. It's a chemical reaction. And what happens is, she explains, is you have a feeling that you are totally, completely, and utterly compatible. And that you have all this intimacy, and there's 4 major intimacies. Intimacy with emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and physical. And there's studies that have been done. Those who are living together, 1 to 10, and they give themselves an average of 9.3. 10 years later, they ask, how much real intimacy did you have before you got married? And they give themselves a 5.4. Those who are not living with each other ask, what is your level of intimacy? And they go, probably a 7.9. 10 years later, how was your intimacy back then? About a 7.9. And it enables, what happens, she says, it enables you to work on things that all of a sudden come up and you're able to see clearly. We're not doing this well. We're not doing that well. We're not compatible here. But if every time there's a fight, the solution is make-up sex, where there's this feeling of, we're good. And it's not, wow, we need some guidance, we need to work on it. So from a nature point of view, we've forgotten there's a purpose for engagement and courtship. And having sex before marriage, you can see why it would not be God's plan from a love point of view, because you still haven't made a commitment.
So you've cut short the courtship.
Yep.
Yeah.
And is commitment an essential element of love? We're in love. Okay, we're in love, Father. Oh, that's great. But no, you don't understand. We're in love. Well, that's really exciting. But, you have all these essential elements of love. But if you haven't made a total commitment, you could back out. But once you've made that total commitment, then that love is full. And that's what people don't understand. That until you give that commitment as a covenant, and that love, that self-giving, that you can give that total self-donation, and that the whole symbol of that total self-donation is the marital act. That you consummate the marriage, and consummate the love you've promised. But if you do that before the commitment, what is the meaning of the commitment? We take it so lightly. So we've missed the essence of our sexuality when, what's a sin? Well, I don't feel it's a sin. Well, we don't even know what it's doing to us and how it's harming us because it feels good.
But Father, everyone else is doing it. And Father, it's so hard.
And isn't love hard? Love is beautiful.
Sometimes I've said to someone, look who you're talking to. So if you're going to tell me it can't be done, I'm sorry, I beg to differ.
Yep. Absolutely. I just, in the seminary you hear about it, but once you're in family life and you see the effects of it, I am more convinced today how harmful premarital sex is.
Mm-hmm. What about love at first sight? Does that exist?
I'll let Tony.
Well, I mean, people.
We hear that all the time.
Yes and no. You know, if it develops into a long-term relationship, married for 50 years, they'll say, well, we fell in love at first sight. Well, they fell into something at first sight that grew and developed and lasted. Whatever the attraction was.
So there might have been a seed of love, but
It's
you
a
can't call
chemistry at
that.
first sight.
Yeah.
We have chemistry at first sight, but it does not matter.
But you know, there's something else that I think has happened. I had to talk to this. And I realize it coming from teaching elementary or junior high students. And you know, you would often or sometimes get people with something's wrong with the homework, or they come in mad or whatever, and what's wrong? My little brother tore up my homework, or he was playing with my phone or with something, and he broke it. And the question became, well, how can he was playing with it? He has no idea what it's worth. It's just a toy to him. It's just a toy. Which is what we've done to sex. Lost the value of it and just made it a toy.
Sacredness of it.
The sacredness of it. And it's just a toy to play with now without any conception of what is this really worth? What is the meaning in it?
Because it's all reduced to pleasure. It's not about procreation. It's not about true spiritual union. It's not about being a co-creator. When you think about that word, co-creator with God, and that God is there blessing that, and you're renewing your covenant every time the marital embrace happens, you go, wow, how beautiful and how sacred it is.
That truly is.
And it is self-giving. I'm going to find a quote, which is the most beautiful thing I have seen in a novel by Dean Koontz, my favorite author. And he hits the nail on the head. But you go on, this might take...
Okay, well, I was just thinking of, as we're talking about marriage and the fruit of the marriage, for me, throughout my whole life, all of my experiences, all of the things that you can think about that are sources of joy, and my wife and I have been blessed by many, many things, but being present at the birth of our child, each child, when you're there, and as the father, I get to be there for the delivery, and then to hold that child for the first time is an incredible experience. And that's only because I know that it's something that Cecilia and I had this opportunity through our marriage, and then also this little aspect of creation. We have this, God does it all, but we have this tiny, tiny piece of participation in this new human being coming into the world. And their eyes are open, they're looking for, they're fully formed. They just need to grow out of that and on. And that's one of the great gifts of life.
I never knew it to that depth, but I got a piece of it 18 years ago. And my friend Kathy called me up at 3 a.m. She was pregnant with my goddaughter. She says, come and pick me up. I'm in labor. I have to go to the hospital. JR has already left for work. So here I am at the church. And, I gotta go. Luckily, they were only about 1.5 miles away. And pick her up in 10 minutes. I'm saying, don't you dare have this baby before we get to the hospital. Because it's going to be a 15 or 20 minute ride to the hospital.
Okay.
But anyway, we got there at 3:30, got a hold of JR. They would get there about an hour later. And meanwhile, I'm babysitting my godson, who was 10 at the time, 11. Anyway, and he's sleeping in the waiting room and so forth. And finally, around 11, I said, it's been a long time. Let's walk across the street to the Beverly Center and get something to eat. Get you lunch, breakfast, or whatever it is. So we got back around noon, and they tell us she was just born. And so as soon as everything's cleaned up, you can come in. So maybe, 20 minutes after she was born, I walked in and looked at her. I'm right there.
Yeah.
I can tell you, it's, like you walk through a door and you live the rest of your life on the other side of it.
That's right.
Something changed.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. Yeah. Fully formed and ready for life.
Dean Koontz writes at the end of his book, Innocence. He says, "In all the many books that I have read, there exists much truth and wisdom, but not in a single volume has the truth of love-making been revealed. When I lie in the arms of Gwyneth in ecstasy, it is essentially not about sensation, but about passion, and a passion that is not of the flesh, but of the mind and heart. No writer ever told me that there is no self in the act, that the desire to give drives out all thought of receiving, that lovers become one, transported, that I am her and she is me, and we find ourselves not engaging in seduction and surrender, but in the throes of creation. Not consumed by desire, but by astonishment, given for a moment the very power that brought into existence the universe, so that we too can create life. She now carries our daughter." Wow.
That is beautiful.
That's for a novel?
Wow. I can see why he's your favorite author. Yeah.
It's the theology of the body.
And very eloquent as well. A great truth.
So in a nutshell, if you had to pack it together, talking to somebody, why is living together wrong?
I think because you still have not given yourself totally in commitment to God and to each other in this covenant. Until that happens, there needs to be work in other areas to prepare for this most wonderful sacrament. And that it's God's plan that there is sacrifice involved in all of this. And if you can't sacrifice this before marriage, what will you not be able to sacrifice after marriage? So it's an offense against you, it'll be an offense against the marriage, and separates you from God. We get into the habit of sex is self-receiving instead of self-giving. Sex is divided from union, from procreation. It's pleasure, and it's devastating in the long term.
It reduces the human person to being an object as opposed to,
Absolutely, yes.
Again, that incredible being made in the image and likeness of God. Think about other human beings that way, especially a spouse. So.
I like that line. I like that line a lot. If you can't sacrifice this before you're married, what will you not be able to sacrifice later on?
Thank you.
You just want to get on camera.
No. Excellent win for myself.
So yeah, when we talk about from the confessional, are there other ones that you wanted to talk about?
I'm still on this. One of the fascinating things I've talked about this in retreats with some teenagers when I was going with a particular parish every year, even though I wasn't assigned to that parish.
Uh-huh.
But in the end, put a question to them when they weren't getting it. Take the example of a boy, girl, man, woman, whatever. Each one's had other partners. Now you're in love, and he says to you, as a sign of my love, this is leading somewhere, and I really love you. I want to give you this, and whatever it is, a necklace, bracelet, a ring, not an engagement ring, but some piece of jewelry that he says, this marks that we're committed. And so everybody's, yeah. And I said, then down the road, you find out that you're the fifth girl he gave it to. And when he breaks up, he takes it back and gives it to the next one. What would you do? And oh, he's a jerk. Boot him out. You know, he's a liar. You can't trust him. Blah blah blah. And I say, so the fact that he's given this necklace to multiple girls means something. The fact that he's given his body to multiple girls means nothing. You're okay with that. So the necklace is worth more than your body. The necklace is worth more than you. A piece of jewelry means something. The body does not.
Great analogy. It is. It really is very powerful. It's easy for someone to see the clarity then what you're actually giving away.
Yeah.
And it's sacred. It's sacred, and it's made for marriage. I mean, just the basic question: why do you think God invented sex? I never thought of it that way. No, God's a great inventor. He invented sex, and He has a purpose. Why did He invent it? Well, we're going to get married anyways. Okay, superb. Why is it so important now? Why can't you wait? Why is it? Is it the foundation of your marriage, or is spiritual intimacy, emotional intimacy, intellectual intimacy the foundation of your marriage? You make that the foundation, and you work on that during courtship, everything's going to be okay. Physical? Well, I want to make sure that we're compatible. I can give you 100 people who were really great sex life, but it's things that happen after, and the hurt, and the disrespect that kills a sex life faster than a speeding bullet. And you go, there is no guarantee for a great sex life. The only guarantee is a good spiritual intimacy and emotional intimacy. That's developed beforehand. There's a purpose, and it takes work, and don't be afraid to do the work.
And when we talk about work too, we're really talking about building up a habit, because you're doing a practice that's good for you, and by repeating that, making it habitual, it actually changes who you are.
And that is a virtue that we're talking about is love, the virtue of love and self-giving, the thinking of the other person, the good of the other person, to seeing their soul and their dignity and their beauty, creating the trust and the respect that are the underpinnings of all of that. It's all about that virtue of love, but it is habitual.
Question for you. I'm curious how you deal with it, because it's a difficult issue. I'll give you an example. I had a couple who married now, but they were both from another state, and they came out here after they graduated from college, not as a couple, but on internships. They got here hoping to lead to jobs. When they were on internship, they got together here and started going out and became a couple and so forth, and moved in together, and their life was out here. Now they had been to another church and were told, we want them to get married 6 months now. We know it's a 6-month thing. I won't marry you unless one of you moves out and gets in their own apartment. And we can't afford that. What do we do now? They're coming to church to get married because it's important to be married in church, and they still go to church, and they can't afford that.
You know what I say? And probably getting criticized by some. But for me, I'll say, okay, first of all, are your parents or anybody else? I'll look, because a lot of times there are other options. But when they come from other states, they can't make ends meet. There is no other way. I'll say, okay, well, one sleeps on the couch and the others, and be very, very careful. You don't enter into the bedroom together. Let's avoid the near occasional sin. So we put ground rules for near occasional sin. I said, but that's not enough. Everybody who knows that you're living with each other, you have to say, we're living with each other now, but we're not sleeping with each other. You have to avoid scandal. I think we forget about that too, because the power of scandal is incredible. If they do those two things, I'll do the wedding. And I've done the wedding of 3 or 4 of those, and they truly are virtuous people, but especially their parents, their brothers and sisters, everybody who knows where they're living need to know that they are being pure and chaste.
And to support them and to pray for them. Yeah, it's not easy.
So, my whole thing is, then I will. It's sort of like, is getting divorced a mortal sin? And, I can't receive communion because I'm divorced. Well, what happened? And you see, a lot of times, they're really abusive situations, and they had no choice in it, okay? And it was to protect them or to protect the kids. You say, well, that's not a sin.
Right.
The church allows that, and you can't even file for an annulment until you get divorced. So, no, it's not a sin. You can receive communion. They go, really? No, it's not a sin. Now, it's a sin to get married without an annulment because, you're still, in the eyes of the church, you're still married to this person, so you can't. So, I don't know where it comes from.
Well, you can't self-diagnose. This wasn't a valid marriage. Because when you can't self-diagnose, you have to let people outside you make that decision. No, it wasn't a valid sacramental marriage.
Yep. But if you're not married, you're not having relations with anybody else, you're taking care of your family, you're in the state of grace.
That's where you, in that context, that might be the best thing you can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing I ask engaged couples, most of the time, well, do you want your wedding night to mean something? Or should Saturday night just be the same as Friday, Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday? No difference. So what was the point? Or do you want your wedding night to have significance? And everybody's, it should mean something. Oh, that's right. So just like nights before they're united, had to do a vigil, and then
That's right.
you need a vigil.
Well, and for
Some
becoming
period of time.
a Knight of Malta, it's a 2-year preparation process.
Yeah.
And then you've got retreats and all that. Plus, there's the vigil the whole day beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're making that kind of life-changing commitment, and marriage is far more fundamental than joining a religious order, it is certainly something you want to prepare for. And it is really special. It's worth it. It's worth the preparation. My uncle used to tell me when he'd have these, be able to take a trip to Europe or something like that once in a while, and he always used to say, more than half of the fun of going on a trip is the preparation for it. So I'd get out the maps and I'd try to think about the museums I'd want to go see or the places I'd want to go to. And it's really true. It's that building up the preparation for it. And then, of course, you want to see it come to fulfillment, which is what marriage is.
Another sin we can talk about is watching pornography. If you're married together, is that sinful? I have heard that one about 15, 16 times. But we're married, so what's wrong with it?
You just gave me a thought that I never thought of before. What if you film yourself and then watch yourself instead of exploiting other people?
I've had 2 cases like that. We've gotten away. We've gotten so far away from the essence of love.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I say, well, wait a minute. What is our sexuality about? Is it about self-giving in love? Or is it about stimulus and physicality? And as soon as, is it wrong that I dress up? I'm going, wait a minute. Is it
What would
wrong
Judge
for you to
Judy
make
say?
yourself an object?
What would Judge Judy say? TMI. Not too much information.
Yeah, but I mean, they're doing, and I'm going, you guys are looking to spruce up your love, and this is a really dangerous and corrosive situation. It's in your friendship and in
Yeah.
your emotional intimacy and in your spiritual intimacy that's going to change everything. It's not about watching something on television or doing all this other. That is the most corrosive thing you can do
How
because
often,
it's objectifying everything.
how often do you find that one really wants it and the other goes along reluctantly?
Oh, all the time. Well, when that happens, 90% of the time. And they've had studies done that it never improves the relationship. It is a door to destruction of the relationship once you go down that. And went to a conference, Protestant pastor who had fallen into pornography and everything else. And his wife had sort of enabled some of this.
Mm.
And they went to help and they got help. And then they started writing books all over the country. This stuff will destroy your relationship. And they did a bunch of studies and they've written 3 books on it. And it just, if your sexuality is not based on friendship and love and the right type of intimacy, nothing else will fill up your heart.
Mhm. Like as you were saying that, what struck me all the time is how this great gift of sexuality becomes deadening, and death is exactly what we don't, what we want to stay away from. We want to look for life and for flourishing, and that's how God has intended us to be as well. So
And if you compare, you will despair. I'm not as beautiful as that woman. It really messes with people's mind.
Well, let me throw something because we spent the whole time on one thing.
yeah, this was gonna be our third and final
Yeah.
installment, and we're not there.
We're not there. But let me put another one on the table. Go for another one that comes up all the time. Impatience and anger. That comes up all the time. How easily people grow angry and I lose my temper and blah blah blah. Do you find that too?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, all the time.
But my question always is, why? Why? Let's talk about what is it? Is it your own expectations? And so many times it's self-hate. You scratch the surface, and I'm going, you have a humility problem. What do you mean? You accepted yourself truly as the beloved of God, and that you don't have to perform, you don't have to achieve, but you're trying to do all these things, and you feel like a failure if you don't. And if somebody gets in their way, boom.
Well, my question is not why. My first question only is where. It's almost always at home. I mean, what? Do you lose your temper with your boss? Well, no. And I said, why not? Because I'll get fired. So I said, so in reality, when you go home, you're not losing your temper, you're giving it away. Because you figure
Great point.
they have to love you anyway.
That's
So you don't
Great point.
what an insight, yeah.
I like that one.
And you're taking your spouse then and family members for granted.
So the people who deserve your best are getting your worst. The people who love you the most get your worst behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking to receive from them instead of give to them.
Yep.
Wrong order.
Because this is the modern notion of working. We're working so hard, so many hours, that when you go back home, it's not for recreation, it's for servicing.
Absolutely. But you know what my dad had on his desk? My day starts at 6 p.m. That's my real work.
Mm-hmm.
And he had that for 30 years.
But how many people working today, and right now we're in perilous times, but normally, how many people get home by 6? And they're leaving before sunrise. They might have an hour commute, and then they're working 8, 9, 10 hours, and then get home another hour or hour and a half. They've had it.
And they're martyrs. I'm doing all this for my family. But what does the family really need from them?
That's right.
Where are you looking for true fulfillment as a person?
Well, I remember my own story in this. I had that life you were describing is the one that I had, especially as a young lawyer. Put in a lot of hours working in downtown LA. Sometimes that commute, I used to joke that I could drive the Pasadena Freeway with my eyes closed, because every turn, you just know it from instinct, because I did the math on it. I think I took the Pasadena Freeway when I was an active lawyer over 5,000 times. Back and forth, back and forth. And there are times when you come back and you're tired. But for me, the great joy, the thing that filled up my well was reading the bedtime stories to our kids when they were small. And then sometimes I tuck them in, and once they were to sleep, then I'd go back to work because I needed to. Not to the office, but work at home, because the demands of the job required it. But I never let them see that. That was my hour and a half of recreation every night.
That's beautiful.
And it was just such a joy. I loved it. We always had a meal, and then we had the bedtime stories and prayers and that sort of thing. And then, tuck them in, and then, okay, time to go back to work.
Yeah, I remember a woman who said that her father, after putting her to bed, would get a chair and sit at the door of her room with a newspaper and read the newspaper until she went to sleep. So she never worried about things under the bed or in the closet or in the dark, because she knew her dad was there when she fell asleep, and how much that meant to her. It's a fascinating thing, and he, for him it was probably 10 minutes. But for her it was everything.
What a symbol.
Yeah.
Well, on this issue that of patience, we're just about out of time, I think. What do you advise people who come in and confess the sin of impatience, especially at home to the people they love most?
Yeah, at home. I mean, well, when you say you're not losing your temper, you give it away. It's like a slap in the face. That really is like a slap in the face. I've recommended many times things we talked about before. Give up having to prove that you're right. You don't have to prove anything that I'm right. And, I'm mad and I have a tough day, and you don't know it, you're gonna know it, and I'm gonna prove it to you by my anger and blah blah blah.
Right.
Just give it up. You might be right, but so what? Do you have to prove it?
Yeah. Well, Jesus certainly knows if you had a bad day.
Yeah. I always love and I forget where I heard it, but I say, when you get to the door, you keep in mind, it's not their fault. If you had a bad day, it's not their fault. You're going to see the people who love you. The thing is, I've talked about this often, whatever you have at the front of your mind is what's going to come out of your mouth.
Yep.
So when you get to the door, if the front of your mind is your anger, what's going to come out of your mouth is your anger. The front of your mind is, these are the people I love, before you walk through that door. The thing that's going to come out of your mouth, these are the people I love. So what's going to be at the front of your mind when you get home?
It's a very good way of putting it. Wow.
That's
Good
what
advice.
I always recommend detox. And I think we talked about it in another, another session, but to go and spend 10 minutes on what your real job is and how you can love your spouse and your kids, and that from the moment you get home, everything becomes eternal. Everything becomes something you're doing for God, and that you have a mission. And to take that mission, and if you're bringing the mission to your spouse, and both are bringing a mission, you're going to have patience. But we have to realize how many toxins we're bringing home. We're filled with toxins, and unless I have a little bit of self-knowledge and I do something with them, give the toxins to our Lord, and He gives me back my mission, it goes a long way. And then just get rid of unrealistic expectations and only worry about God's expectations, and that's to love and laugh at yourself.
I think laughing at yourself is a good thing too.
Oh,
that
it's really
helps.
important.
But,
Only the humble can laugh at themselves.
well, we didn't get nearly as far along as I thought, but this was a very great conversation.
It was.
And this is a perspective for me because of your experience in the confessional with thousands of the faithful over the years and with the families that you've worked with. That's a great insight. It's really something we all ought to think about because we're all involved in a family in some fashion. And if we are part of a family, then we need to be in the habit of being a good family member. And these things are very solid for that. So we're going to start 6:30 again tomorrow. And Father John has the closing prayer now.
That's great. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, we ask you that we may truly open our hearts to your love. Let that love penetrate our hearts so that we may, in turn, reflect that love to all those around us, especially our family members. Grant us patience, grant us love, grant us purity, grant us the strength and courage to be the men and women that you are calling us to be. And we ask all this through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Who has a topic for